Welcome to another episode of the albumreview.net podcast. I'm Greg Potters. For today's episode number 83, this is going to be a review for you prog rock fans. Specifically, prog rock fans of the Canadian power trio Rush and their 13th studio album, released in 1989, not their 13th of 89, but their 13th album that was released in 1989, called Presto. And joining me on today's episode is Alon Ferency. Alon is a rabbi, a creative consultant, counselor, and coach. He's also a cross-country bicyclist, Peace Corps volunteer, author, concert producer, chaplain, and like me, I'm none of those other cool things, but like me, a huge fan of the band Rush. Alon reached out to me a few months ago. We had a really great introduction and bonded quickly over our love for Rush, and we agreed to review a Rush album together. Because this album is Alon's favorite from the band, we decided to talk about it today on the albumreview.net podcast. I must also say this to you non-Rush fans. I hear you. I respect you. Although I am not a part of your group, I encourage you to listen to this episode today. Why? Because Alon Ferency is truly a wonderful person, and I think you will see that or hear that in this episode today. Not only is he intelligent and spiritual, but I felt a great comfort when talking to Alon, like he and I had been best friends for decades. It wasn't just the bonding over a band. It was how we both connect music to important periods of our lives. So, all of you, Rush fan or not, I invite you to listen to this episode, a review of Rush's 13th studio album, 1989's Presto. Kick it. As the 1980s came to a close, so did much of the heavy synth phase of the Canadian trio Rush's music. After completing the 1987-1988 tour supporting Hold Your Fire, Rush decided to part ways with their record company Mercury and form their own record company with manager Ray Daniels, titled Anthem Records. So this gave Rush more autonomy and eliminated really the need to worry about record company deadlines. Bassist and lead singer Geddy Lee discussed going in a new direction as the 1990s approached. Guitarist Alex Lifeson was more in favor of getting back to the band's sound from the 1970s, which was more guitar-driven. Although very reluctant to ditch a lot of their synth sound, Geddy eventually agreed, which I think shows that the love each of the band members had for each other far superseded their desire to win an argument. So recorded at Les Studios, Marin Heights, Quebec, in the summer of 1989, Presto was released on November 21st, 1989. And joining me today is good friend and Rush aficionado, Alon Ferency. Alon, how you doing, man?
So I did not get to do the math in preparation, but I was 14.
Okay.
It was the age roughly of my eldest son now.
Wow.
Don't know if I was as rude to my parents as he is to me, but I wonder if I could introduce him to Presto and see if that would help.
Please do. What I'd love to, if you don't mind, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? And then the big question I have right after that, if you could piggyback off of, is why is Presto so special to you?
Wow. Yeah. I was dreading trying to put all this into words because it's a struggle, even as I was listening to it last night in preparation. So I grew up near Massachusetts. I grew up near Boston in Massachusetts in a smallish Jewish community, became very actively engaged in youth group and camping. Quiet, nerdy, smart, awkward kid. Quiet, probably not quiet. More of an extrovert, but a thwarted extrovert. I loved Dungeons and Dragons. As I feel like the nerd triumvirate is Rush, Dungeons and Dragons, and the X-Men. And I was into all of those things when they not only weren't cool, they were like things you had to keep to yourself. And at some point, the first time I saw the band was the video for the Grace Under Pressure tour. That's still very fond memories of that's what they look like. And there's just three of them. I probably knew there were just three of them because their photos were on album covers. The first Rush album I bought was a cassette of Power Windows, which the store owner definitely told me, you want to buy moving pictures. And I said, well, Power Windows has more tracks on it. So I bought Power Windows, and I still liked it, even though it gets some attacks. The first album that came out during my lifetime, during my awareness of the band, was Hold Your Fire. And I remember a camp counselor wearing a Grace Under Pressure t-shirt, which is still my favorite album cover of theirs. I think it's just beautiful artwork. So I grew up awkward. I am now a rabbi. In between, I worked in the Peace Corps. I worked abroad. I cycled cross country. I hiked in a couple of countries. I worked in the music business after the Peace Corps, worked on a presidential campaign, then went back to grad school to get a master's in Jewish education, and then seminary, where I became a rabbi in 2010, at which point I married and we started to have a family, and we moved to Knoxville, Tennessee, where I live now. I was a pulpit rabbi here, right across the street, at the synagogue right across the street, for just a little over 12 years. And then just a little over 2 years ago, I stepped down from the pulpit to coach artists and creators full time. So working at the intersection of spirituality and creativity, art and faith, and helping people see the interconnectedness of that, which most artists don't really struggle to see that. They just need tools to use it, I think, is what I would say.
Right.
And to be embraced in that process and not to feel excluded from faith because of dogma, but to understand that they have a deep spirituality that they can access to make the art, whether it's music or game design or a novel.
Wow. I really need to set up an appointment with you then. I should talk to you about that. That's
yeah,
amazing.
I'd love to. I'd love to. Yeah.
So you hinted at this already, but one of the things I have to start off with, and I'll mention it probably again, is just thank you. When we first met, we had a conversation about Rush albums. And I was like, I could really do any, but here are some of the ones that I prefer. And Presto wasn't on that list. However, I saw your reaction and you were very quickly, that's got to be Presto. And I'm really glad that I was like, yeah, sure, Presto. I think I was thinking about this too this morning. I think out of all of their albums, probably the three that I listened to the least were Vapor Trails, Test for Echo, and Presto. Why? I don't really know. Anyways. But so this experience, you really being passionate about this album, really brought me back and has made me fall in love with this album again. And so thank you. I want to start everything off with thank you, because I might not have picked this. I might have gone deep into the 70s again, or I might have done something closer to when they finished their album creations. So anyways, thank you for that. And so I think you had told me, Alon, that Presto was really the first album that you were already a fan, and it was the first album that came out as you were now officially a Rush fan. Do I have that right?
Probably true. Probably true. And I don't think Hold Your Fire connected with me in the same way. And it's hard to know. I remember, I guess must have been about ninth grade. I think the album came out around, I was in a play. I remember being in a school play and talking to one of the other kids. Oh, it's coming out tonight. And I don't know if it's really a great album or it's just a great album, an album that came at the right time in my life. It is the only album they did with Rupert Hine, right, who was more typically a pop producer. So it has a pop sheen.
Definitely.
I think the songwriting is excellent and much sharper than some other places. Probably the sharpest songwriting since Signals, which is, I think, 82. And there's just it's the most sensitive of the Rush albums, right? There's a tenderness to the album that I really like. There's a song, The Pass, which is almost undoubtedly about suicide.
Yeah.
There's some almost poetic writing that is more imagistic than philosophical in Neil Peart's lyric writing. I think it sounds great. It still does have some keyboards, but they're not overwhelming. There's a couple of tracks that as I was listening last night, are not as strong as the rest of the album. But
agreed. I
would say the title track, Presto, is, if not my favorite song, it's up there with something like Natural Science or In the End or La Vela Strangiato.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No. We're going to rush out. We're going to geek out.
The band wanted to follow up their Hold Your Fire tour and album to create more of a singer's album, as songs like Show Don't Tell follow suit with a very sing-along chorus.
Yeah.
Getty felt that drummer and primary lyric writer Neil Peart wrote more relatable lyrics that were heartfelt. And I think Presto, in many ways, was the band's revolt against technology, which you can clearly hear in virtually every track. They were growing tired of working with synths. And as you said, Alon, they did have some synth in there, but the band agreed to take away, as I was saying earlier, they agreed to take away much of the pianos and the organs that came from computers. Now,
Right.
A lot of times I date myself when I use the word computer. I don't think that's a word that anybody under the age of 20
AOL dial-up. Yeah. They used the dial-up.
Nowadays, if someone say computer, it's most likely your grandfather or the machine. I got to go on the machine to check my email, right? So
the internets.
Yeah, just pluralize everything, and that's what I'm going to. Yeah. I'm going to get there. I'll be there. I'm just going to wave the white flag.
I look forward to getting old and watching World War II documentaries.
Hey, I already do that. So what are you saying, man? Yeah. So Rush would also take the writing of Presto in another direction compared to Hold Your Fire, Power Windows, and Grace Under Pressure, in my opinion, where they wanted to create an overall running lyrical theme for their next body of work. Alon, in terms of 80s sound or 80s records for Rush, how would you describe Presto to other Rush albums of the 80s? Like, how is it different? I think you alluded to some of it already, but could you elaborate a little bit more on that? How is it different from some of the other 80s Rush albums?
I want to go to what you're saying first, the heartfelt, right? The lyrics are both simpler and more vague. It's definitely heartfelt. There's a lot of acoustic guitar, at least in overdub, or maybe it was the primary track. There is something in a track or two that sounds like a piano. I can't tell you whether it was a keyboard or literally a acoustic piano recorded. And the production has some things in common, I think, with Grace Under Pressure in terms of sound. Like there's a sharpness to the edges and it's not overly glossy in the way I found Hold Your Fire. It's poppy, so it sounds bright. It sounds clear. It doesn't sound like it has too many layers, although the way things are recorded, maybe the guitar was over-recorded. You tend to record 2 tracks of guitar just to give it a rich sound, at least, although there's a Metallica sound that has 8-tracked guitar.
Right.
So I think, and I don't know if it's a production. I mean, there's definitely something about Rupert Hine that he brought to that album that is on no other Rush album, where there's a clarity of sound, a clarity of concept. Everything is visible. Your mind can switch from one part to another very quickly. There's more in 4/4. Scars has this incredible rhythmic section that's just, and I hadn't listened to it. I remember Neil talking about the rhythmic motif in Scars, and I didn't quite follow it, but it's quite interesting. As always, and this for a lot of Rush fans, and there's a band called L1011 that also did this to me, where I assumed it was 6 people and it's actually 2, right? It's like, how many bassists are there? And is that a guitar and a keyboard? And how is that drummer doing? Are there 2 drummers?
Right.
And not just polyrhythmic, but like seemingly impossible. Now that I play a little bit of drums, I can't imagine it. The idea, I was thinking about this in preparation for talking with you, the idea that Rush is a band that launched a lot of bands seems so improbable to me, because my reaction to Rush wasn't, I should play in a band. My reaction to Rush is, that's not like anything I could ever do. Yeah. And I was listening to an interview with Robert Trujillo from Metallica, who talked about his love of Rush, which always touches me. And the people they have influenced is fascinating. And I think this is a slept on album. I think people don't look at it as a real Rush album because it's somewhat simpler. Right? There are parts where there's tempo shifts or time signature shifts or really hard bass parts, but it could almost be a pop album.
Agreed.
Or it could almost be not hair metal, but pop rock album. Yep. But only in the good ways, right? There's a sincerity to it that I love Bytor and the Snow Dog, but that's a silly song.
Right.
It's a silly song. Like, it's a great song, and a real Rush fan loves it when they play it in concert, but it's a D&D adventure set to music, as is 2112.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And they're incredible musically and super fun to listen to and rock out to and hear live. But Presto is about songs. I always felt that about the Grateful Dead. I never understood why people like them live. I found their jams to be intolerable, but I thought they were great songwriters.
For
And
sure.
I think it's the album where the songwriting is clearly the strongest. Maybe Signals has a similar strength, where the songs are all Losing It and New World Man. The songwriting is so tight. The song like The Garden at the end of their last album,
Oh gosh.
where there's just like beauty. Every part is beautiful and synchronized and creates an experience. Whereas The Trees is amazing musical, or Xanadu is amazing musically, but it's like, what is this song about except being awesome and fun?
Yeah. Yeah. I find that you're right. The Gardener, even something like Presto, I don't want this to come off the wrong way, but I could hear this album or songs from this album off the radio, or I could see someone who's not necessarily into prog rock getting a little bit more into this album because the choruses, that's what I was getting at, especially with Show Don't Tell. In fact, I think Show Don't Tell might have been the first Rush song that I ever heard. I was an addict of MTV in the 80s and into the 90s as well. But MTV and the radio was really whatever came out of that. So I read a quote from Neil on the topic of songwriting that's really moved me, Alon, and I agree with that. He said he, quote, used the word response to describe the lyrical content of his writing this album as a whole, unquote. He went on to say, quote, the idea that you don't go through life just looking at things, it doesn't matter if you've been all around the world, you may have seen it, but if you haven't felt it, you haven't been there, end quote. He told this to the Canadian Press in a 1990 interview. And I just thought that really resonated with me. When I see something, I feel it. I find myself many times, if I'm taking a stroll and I see somebody sitting down on a park bench, for a minute or two, I get lost thinking, I wonder if that person's happy. I wonder if that person's going through some stress right now. And I think that's really at the heart of what Neil is getting at, really, the feeling of it. So you're reading something, what do you take it as? And then how does it make you feel? So the Presto title was also an idea that the band had considered using for their live album, 1989, A Show of Hands. But when Neil started writing the song Presto, it was then used, the band decided, no, we've got to use this as the title of the album. So
The song Presto was started before the live album came out.
yes,
Interesting.
yes,
That's
yeah,
very interesting.
very interesting. Yeah. So
It is my favorite song on the album, and there's a couple of really just stellar tracks for me.
agreed.
I think what you're hinting at, though, in that quote and what your experience of it is, the quote sounds very meditative. To be of a moment, which is so much a part of arts making, and in my experience working with artists, is teaching people to receive and attune, but it's also compassionate. There's something about Neil in interviews that seems a bit standoffish. He admits to being an introvert,
Big time.
but not exactly misanthropic, but somewhat indifferent to social niceties and human experiences. And Presto seems so intimate, heartfelt, and compassionate. And it was before he was broken by the deaths of his daughter and wife,
Right.
which can bring out so much compassion and so much human sensitivity. So it's interesting. I wonder what triggered that. And it might have been just touring and feeling the weight of all that, or something in his personal life. Because you don't have I haven't read his memoirs in the way I've listened to Getty's memoir. But yeah, it's a sensitivity. So this album has a sensitivity. And it's also, as you were saying something else, I don't recall what, I'll listen to Signals in the car and just roll down the windows and turn it up and drive. Presto's almost always in bed, like late at night.
Yeah.
Presto's just a quiet album.
Yeah.
That I want to just drift into.
Yeah.
And be sleepy and feel the bass line carry me away and notice parts of the song that I didn't notice before.
Right.
Last night it was Scars. And I don't know if that was ever one of my favorite tracks. And I was like, I get why people love this song or don't love this song, since the album is so underrated.
Right out of the gate, it's clear, you were saying it earlier, Alon, Show Don't Tell is more of a progressive off that regular time signature track. This was the first song, as I mentioned earlier, that I heard off of the album in 89. I can remember watching the video on MTV and thinking, wow, these guys look goofy. But as a lover at the time of hard rock and metal, I was really drawn to their music ability. So just the opening, Just show, don't tell, and how the intro starts.
What signature is that in? Did you ever count it?
You stumped me.
Oh, I always said, I'm going to listen to it. Maybe it was in 4, but I haven't counted it out. I always felt it was pretty straight ahead, but yeah. And you were about to say something. I don't want to cut you off.
No, it's okay. It's the early, I'm a bass player and I play guitar too, but bass was always my love. And I feel like the bass and the drums are connected. And so I was always, tapping my foot and I was hearing the bass line. And it was natural for me when I was anywhere, and this is going to sound goofy, but this is why we're doing this, to air drum. But of course, I was thinking, I need to make sure that I'm watching Neil and seeing where he drums, so that when I air drum, I can make sure that I'm hitting the right cymbal or the right drum in the right place. And I just remember having absolutely no ability to keep up, even from an air drumming perspective. And so to me, as goofy as it sounds, Alon, that has been my rating of a really good drummer, because I feel so much. So I won't go into rabbit holes, but different bands, and with the intro to Show Don't Tell, I'll spare the listeners my verbal drumming here again, but it's just in a different time signature that immediately caught my attention. And so I was like, how did they do that? So, you know what? I did look it up, and I do have it in front of me here. The song was written in a 7/8 time signature, which essentially is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1.
The whole song is 7/8? I will have to count it out next time I listen. Yeah.
That's what I read. And unlike common time signatures, like you were saying, Alon, 4/4, 7/8 has an odd number of beats per measure, which kind of creates more of a rhythmic feel. So
certainly can't dance to it.
No.
You cannot dance to it.
You could.
Or march to it, or it has none of the classic uses of music.
Right. So you play drums, right? And you
poorly. No, I play drums enough to know how impossible it is to be a good drummer. That's the way I am with most instruments.
Okay.
I could get around a bass. I played guitar on and off for years. I piano, sing. I am interested in arts making only enough to understand how hard it is.
Yeah.
That's the way I'm with soccer and boxing. Like I know a little and enough to realize when people are really good, why that's obscenely hard and not just interesting. Right.
Yeah, right. So as a drummer, I'm going to call you a drummer. As a drummer, I think you certainly have more of an appreciation for Neil. And I think I could do another 5 episodes on Neil and his style, but also do other episodes on how he's different from other drummers. But the one thing that I'll always take home with me is every drummer I've ever met personally has said Neil is above all the rest. And it's mainly because of the things that he does that they can't even fathom. So you have more of an appreciation for it when you're a musician. And that's why Rush has always been considered a musician's band. So, but getting back to the album, so without a doubt, for me,
Well, before we go back, can I say something that I was thinking about?
Yeah.
I've been thinking about this a lot with them in the past year with the anniversary of his death. And every musical part is like with somewhat of the exception of Presto, every musical part, they each are playing the hardest thing they could play at that moment.
Exactly.
And a little bit less with Alex on guitar. And I think that's why people don't acknowledge that he is one of the best guitarists of all time, because Geddy's doing these things on bass and doing something asyncopated with that on his voice, and also triggering things with his feet on keyboards. And Neil's limb independence is phenomenal. He's creating multiple rhythms on drums. As I said, it could be like a percussionist and a drummer. Exactly. They once called themselves the smallest orchestra ever. And I feel like
that's very accurate.
And if you listen to La Villa Strangiato, or even some of the less insanely difficult songs, or the popular songs like Tom Sawyer, which is not one of my favorites, but those drum fills are ridiculous, everyone says. And they don't pick the easy way. They don't pick the obvious way ever, sometimes to a fault. And I think Presto eases back the throttle on that. And that's how you get to a more sense of the heartfelt and the sincere and the empathetic. But there's still incredibly difficult bass lines and incredibly obscure drum patterns. Yeah. And I think what I think about, sorry, you did want to say something about the album, but I'm thinking about my own experience of it.
Please go ahead. Keep going.
The band, people often talk, if you're a lonely kid, you loved Subdivisions because it's about being a bit of an outcast or a lone wolf, or The Past, which is about depression and maybe suicidality. I think it was them, right? The idea of being so uniquely idiosyncratic and like actively and aggressively idiosyncratic, right? They're not going to sound like another band, except maybe in the first album and the connection to Zeppelin and that era of bands, or Black Sabbath. At least by the time Neil gets to the band, they're doing a thing. They're doing exactly what they want. And the story of they were about to get dropped from their label after Caress of Steel, and they doubled down and did 2112, right?
Did 2112. Yep. And then after that, every Rush fan,
the label couldn't say anything.
Couldn't say anything, right? So, and this was an
interesting, and how hard that is. How hard that is to be quirkily intelligent in your music, distinctly and almost aggressively idiosyncratic, to write lyrics that are little science fiction poems. I once did a rundown in my head of what these songs on Moving Pictures about. Tom Sawyer is even literary figures could be punks. Red Barchetta is death race in the future where cars are outlawed. YYZ is ode to our favorite airport.
Yep.
Limelight is, oh dear God, I didn't want to be famous.
Yep.
What's the next? The Camera Eyes. You're big two cities that are busy.
Yep. Yep.
And the Witch Hunt is book burning is bad. and Vital Signs is reggae cyberpunk. I'd love to. I didn't do that with any other albums. I did that once. I think it's just, there's no love songs. There's so rarely they're writing traditional love song or a ballad, or it's even the subject matter and the intensity and the design of the songs. It's not, prog is a shorthand for it, but this is the way we hear things.
Yeah.
And what we love and what attracts us to it. And the idea that a song like Show Don't Tell is in 7/8 but still swings is really weird. It's a really hard thing to pull off.
Exactly. And I think that's where most musicians who might not necessarily be into them because perhaps they don't necessarily vibe with Geddy's voice, they have to put their hands up and, again, I'll say, wave the white flag and, okay, this is something that I couldn't even imagine not only doing, executing, but writing as well. Not only did this guy do it, but he wrote it.
Right.
So you bring up a lot of great points. And I think a lot of Neil's songwriting started with Limelight when he was talking about, just like you said, I wanted to be famous, and now that I am, I don't really want to be, and it's not all it's cracked up to be. And this album, you're definitely right. You're hitting on a lot of the same points that I was thinking too, Alon, is this album really goes deep from a lyrical standpoint. I think, to me, and you said one of them already, the tracks, The Pass and Presto, are my two favorites. I can remember seeing them at a show, at one particular show in Mansfield, Massachusetts. So the Great Woods Performing Arts Center, or Center for the Performing Arts.
That is a great place to see. Now the Tweeter Center or something bizarre, but for us
Now
oldies, it's Great Woods always.
Exactly. Yes. In fact,
Always
I should have worn my other shirt that I have that says I'll always call it Great Woods. Or I still call it Great Woods. So I can remember at one particular show, Geddy saying to the crowd that The Pass was his favorite Rush song in the entire catalog. And I thought this was a show in the like early 2000s, I think. I remember I was on the line.
Show.
Were you?
I think I was at that show. This is the first time I had really good seats. I think it was the Vapor Trail show. And because I have a vague memory of what's his favorite song?
I think you're right. Yeah, it was in the early 2000s. So I want to say 02 or 03 or something around there.
I think that was Vapor Trails, and a great set list. Had a lot of wonderful songs. By-Tor and the Snow Dog.
Yep.
Natural Science and La Villa Strangiato. You don't get to hear those often enough.
No, you don't. No. I thought that comment by Geddy held some really serious weight at the time, Alon. And I don't remember him ever saying that about any other song. So a lot of Rush fans know that starting in the 1980s and continuing until they retired in 2015, that Neil would travel to each or many of the road gigs by driving his own motorcycle. And you alluded to it earlier, Alon, after he lost his daughter and his common law wife in the same year, 1997, it was within 9 or 10 months of each other. He just took off on his bike riding across most of the world. And if you watch their documentary, there's a lot of interviews by the rest of the guys, including Ray Daniels, their manager, who said, we didn't know if he was ever going to want to come back. So we put the band on, we put the band on hold and didn't know if we were ever going to revisit it. But it was on the road where Neil really did much of his thinking. And so, Alon, you brought up an awesome point earlier. I have to admit, until I really dug deep to do some studying on this album a few weeks back, I guess it really then hit me that The Pass it's about a friend of Neil's who joined him on many of these long motorcycle rides. And his friend shared with Neil that as a child, he contemplated suicide, which really inspired the lyrics for the song.
Swagger out of the schoolyard, waiting for the world's applause. Rebel without a conscience, martyr without a cause. Static on your frequency, electrical stone in your veins, raging at unreachable glory.
And Neil noted that The Pass was one song in his career that he said up until then he had worked the hardest on due to the delicate nature of the topic. So it goes back to that interview, that quote that he made to the Canadian press in 1990 about really feeling, right? So you've already talked a lot about the Pass, and I'll get to Presto in a minute, but any additional thoughts on your end about that song?
More broadly about the album, I think the album's a lot about human connection. Hand Over Fist is absolutely about human connection and the places where human connection phrase, even Available Light, which closes the album. Those two close the album, and deeply beautiful songs. Presto is certainly about it. The Pass is about it. Yeah, I wonder what the experience was of writing some of those songs. And I think also, I was thinking about this with Red Sector A, which is a song about the Holocaust, Jewish decimation and genocide by the Nazis. And I remember listening to that growing up and thinking, that sounds like it's about Auschwitz, but it can't be. No one would write a song about that.
Right.
And then finding out at some point that it was, and the whole aspect of Neil writing words that Getty sings, and that song in particular being about Getty's, not only about Getty's family, but Getty's family were survivors of the Holocaust.
Yep.
To write such a sensitive song that is so accurate to the experience and can be sung empathetically and emotionally and carefully, lovingly, by someone else whose family went through the experience is such a bizarre sense of camaraderie and synchronicity. And I think Presto does that very well. And I think Rupert Hine creates this not overly high gloss production, but just enough to give it clarity and sharpness and a resolution. It's an album with high resolution. And as you said, not too much keyboards to get in the way. It's just enough to flavor and a couple of almost piano parts, as I mentioned.
Yeah.
It's a very intimate album and it seems very personal. I don't know why. Nothing in the story you've said suggests that this is triggered by like spending 3 months in the woods or the death of a friend or a new marriage or a new child. But it's accessing something very deep within them that, as I said, a lot of their albums are heady and technical and fun. I always thought when I learned the story of La Villa Strangiato, the idea that they wrote something that they couldn't always play, that it was too hard to play. And I was like, who writes songs they can't play? Yeah. That to me is the greatest thing about this band, is that they wrote a song, they challenged themselves so much, so consistently. Yeah. And then, as I said, I think Presto takes the foot off the gas just enough. And it is, as you indicate, Scars also. It's so much songs about human connection and that the fragility of human connection, and then not being, and I'm teaching a class at a church about spirituality and creativity, and not being too on the nose. Yeah. Right. There's a difference between creating a song like a Leonard Cohen song or a Steinbeck novel that has elements of faith and dogma and scripture in it, but doesn't tell you how to think. And then Christian or Jewish music here's exactly what you need to think about this and do about it. And I think Presto is subtle like that.
Yeah. Certainly this song, The Pass, it triggers a lot of emotions for me, but it's really just about fond memories. And I have a particular friend who was responsible for getting me into this band, and just so many times sitting in his bedroom, looking out his back window at the woods and just going through album after album. And we just sit there for hours and we just talk. And this is 12, 13, 14, 15 years old. And The Pass, as a bass player, just the opening intro part with the bass really grabbed me, but Static on Your Frequency, so I listened to the song again last night to get back in the mood, and I listened to the whole album this morning after getting some breakfast, and those emotions came back up again, but they were all good emotions, all good memories. And that's what really inspired me to say, what, if it weren't for Alon, I don't know if I would have gone back and really listened to this. So it made me excited again to not just listen to this album, but it really reminded me, Alon, of how much I love doing this and how much I love this job and how
it's a good
much
job.
This music inspires me.
Yeah.
And I can't put it into words.
If I could wave my magic wand, I am made from the dust of the stars, and the oceans flow in my veins. Here I hide in the heart of the city, like a stranger coming out of the rain. The evening plane rises up from the runway over constellations of light. I look down into a million houses and wonder what you're doing tonight. If I could wave my magic wand, I'd make everything alright.
put into words something you were hinting at, which is there's a bittersweetness to this album and a bit of nostalgia, which a song like Time Stands Still or Bravado also has, which kind of bookend this album.
I like that, yeah.
A gentleness. There's a tenderness to this album. And then, like many, what Rick Beato online calls high information music, any high information music reveals itself again and again. It always feels fresh because I didn't notice there's a little keyboard part there. Or I didn't notice that trick he does on the bass, right? Or, oh, there's an extra singer. He double tracked his vocals. Like I hadn't heard that the first time.
Right.
And I think most Rush albums and many good albums do that, but Presto always feels fresh. And it always reminds me of the first time in that bittersweet and nostalgic way. I remember not exactly where I was the first time, but the first times. Being young and having it's got to be the first album that really touched me. And the right album at the right time, someone else said when I was on another podcast about music. There are in one's life the right albums at the right time. And that's why when you say, why do I like Presto? I can't tell you it's a great album. I know it's a great album for me. Yeah. And it was like the Final Cut. We talked about Pink Floyd before we went on. It was the right album at the right time.
Yeah.
When I heard it. And
do you ever, I constantly try to make a connection to my emotions and how they were so impactful when I was younger. And the only thing that I keep coming up with, and I've talked to hundreds of people about this to get their opinion, I want yours, is I think if I had to narrow it down, I think for me it was, granted we're young and we're going through, our brains are still forming, we're going through puberty, all that, but I think in many ways, the music I heard when I was young, it was the innocence. I don't want anyone to listen to this take this the wrong way, but I think as a young kid, the world is your oyster, and you can really daydream about anything. And I don't have really any major regrets now that I'm pushing 50, but I guess that's what I came back to, was like, why was it so important then? When I hear something now, I really like it, but it might not necessarily be as moving as it was when I was 13 or when I was 14. And to piggyback off that, when I would listen to music, I just envisioned myself on stage at the Boston Garden or on stage at Madison Square Garden and just expressing myself to people who were interested in being there. And so that was a connection that I brought as to like, why as kids it's maybe more impactful than as an adult. Well, you could argue the other way as well, because we know more when we're adults and we I think, appreciate things a little bit more. But I just find that a lot of the experiences that I had with music when I was a kid, they're hard to compete with.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I think both times in life, all times in life have a meaning and a value. And it is nice to be getting older, except for my hip.
Right. Yeah.
There's a lot of benefit and bonus to age and wisdom. Part of what I'm guessing at, and some of this is working with artists and watching their life cycles, there's ways to be creative and rich at all stages. It was also new. And it's like there's never a kiss as good as your first kiss, even if it was mechanically probably a messy thing, right? I think she had gum in her mouth. I was like, who does that? Could you spit out your gum? Right. And I found out at my 25th college reunion that I had been someone's first kiss, and I was like so touched. And I think those musical experiences, we can never get back. And I think there's intensity, as you described, because there's hormones flowing, because it's also new and novel. And then there's a little bit of, it's all mysterious, right?
Yeah.
By this age in my life, I've worked in the music business. I played a lot of instruments. I know how to read music. I know how music gets made. I've worked in recording studios. There's less mystery and awe around it. And it doesn't seem just like this raw experience of music and emotion, but we have some sense of the technique and craft that went into it. And we know Neil's story.
Yeah.
Right. There was a difference when I didn't know what they looked like. And I couldn't imagine, this has got to be 6 people playing this, right?
Right.
And you see them and you're like, oh, those are 3 awkward looking dudes with bad haircuts. Or the first video I saw was Time Stands Still, which I rewatched.
Oh, when they were like floating around.
This is truly an atrocious video. Like a really bad music video.
Bad. Yes.
Really bad. Like it's all green screen and they're just like, let's move people around. It's a really bad music video.
Yes,
it's a beautiful song.
Yep.
And they all have bad haircuts. And regardless, no, I think it's about just there's a potency to youth.
Yeah.
Right. And you watch a band. I don't know if there's a band maybe the Rolling Stones, but they've had some lineup changes where it's been so consistent for so long and you can watch the growth of the band. And if you watch, I saw a performance at, I want to say 78 of Getty, of them all doing La Villa Strangiato. And I think I calculated they were 28. Like they're playing this obscenely hard thing at age 28 in front of 10,000s of people.
Yeah.
And to have the audacity to think that's an acceptable choice, right? Like I did not have the capacity to do anything that daring at that age.
No, definitely not. And that's what I mean, right? And that's when I think back to, I could go on for hours, but
in the way they're role models, not just Rush, but artists can be role models to us.
Yeah.
Right? Things we want to become, even if in their private lives they're getting high on cocaine and their marriage is ending. What's the word I'm looking for? Embezzling money from the band. Things happen, right? But they're not perfect people, but there's something about what they express that is a model to us.
The embezzlement thing, what are you referring to? Was there...
I wasn't referring to any of them.
Oh,
the cocaine, yes. The cocaine, they do talk about 80s. This is past the cocaine era. No, I was just thinking about people I know who are in bands or stories of bands, and they're just, they're not role models. I don't expect them to be role models in their personal life, but they're role models of some artistic achievement and expression.
Yeah.
And they teach us how to feel things. And before we can have psychotherapy or Prozac, they teach us how to absorb and metabolize our emotions.
Yeah.
So they teach us about how challenging love is.
It's always been a natural medicine for me. I asked almost every guest I've had on this podcast, did you use music to escape? And it's really because I want to find out if they were like me. I had a great childhood, but whenever I had a bad day, that was my medicine. And it was unbelievable how it cured me quickly, very quickly, especially when I invested in a nice pair of headphones. Sadly, my hearing has deteriorated significantly over the years, but there's a piece of me that kind of holds that as war paint or a scar.
Yeah.
No pun intended. So talking about war paint, I got to admit, Alon, it didn't originally grab me when I first heard it in '89. Talking about it earlier, to your point, I understand Presto was your first love when we're speaking in terms of Rush albums. It holds a really special place in your heart. Your memories, I'm sure, of driving to your first show. I don't know if you remember that.
Worcester Centrum, my friend.
Okay. So I mean,
there was a horrific experience where two guys, I was at the top tier.
Okay.
And two dudes brought in a prostitute and had sex with her in front of me, and I'm 14 or 16 and very excited to see Rush and very disturbed and also full of hormones and can't look away while they're playing. It was horrific.
In the crowd at the show, this was
behind me.
Were they like up against the back wall?
We were up against the back wall. I literally had the highest seats in the house.
Holy.
And like a couple seats over, they had brought, I assume, I don't know why you would pay for a ticket for a prostitute. I don't know what was going on. It was horrific. It was really, anyway. I still enjoyed the rest of the show after I think they opened up with Force 10 and Free Will. And by the end of that, I could move on, but I was not an experience for a 14 or 16-year-old and waiting for my mom to pick me up from the Centrum. I don't know if I ever told her about it.
That's amazing. That is incredible. My first show was Anthrax in 1989. I was 12. And I remember a guy in front of me smoking weed, but I had no idea what weed was. So I just thought that his cigarettes smelled funny. The look, my dad brought me to the show with a couple friends and my little brother at the time. So I was 12. My brother was like 9 or 10. And and these guys are in front of us. At Anthrax, that's amazing. When they're yelling F this and F that. I mean, but your experience at 14, that would Yeah, that would definitely leave a mark on me.
It left a mark.
That would leave a transition. That would leave a scar.
It didn't sour me on the band or the concert experience.
why
I mean, it's
would
still weirdly,
why would it?
incredibly rich experience of that concert.
If anything, I think that kind of world fascinated me. I can remember at Anthrax being in line to go to the bathroom, and I'll never forget this guy behind me was like, "Get out of the way, my buddy's gonna barf! My buddy's gonna barf!" And for those of you who aren't familiar with the Boston accent, he's saying barf, which is another word for throw up, puke, we all know. And when I'm this little kid, and I, of course, am like getting out of the way, I don't want any, and that was my first experience with drunk people and understanding that. But I was weirdly, I don't want to say I was attracted to that, but I think what I was attracted to most of all as a kid with music was just like, everybody told me no. Oh, those guys are bad. It's bad news. It's long hair. They just encourage people to do negative things. I grew up in a fairly conservative family, and I just looked at that as my chance to rebel. And I wasn't necessarily following that guy out of the venue afterwards to laugh about his barfing, but I just was, wow, like this world is different from what I'm used to. I'm used to this prim, proper, everybody wears a collared shirt, and here I am in this other world, and for some reason it's scary, but I like that. I feel like this is what's going to make me grow, and this is what's going to make me be independent. That might, I don't know, that might sound weird to some people, but those are the feelings that I had. But
oh, I get it. I also just want to tell your audio listeners I have long hair and a collared shirt right now. So I'm swinging across both worlds.
You're riding in style, yes.
No, it's this window into an adult world. I also think, and I noticed this when I was dating and in therapy, you think the way your family does things is the way everyone does them. And music and art is a way of expanding your imagination, your moral imagination. There's a line in, I think, the third book of the Song of Ice and Fire, the Game of Thrones books. The person who reads lives 1,000 lives, and one who doesn't read gets to live only one. And through art, we see the prism of human experience. So you're getting out both to the artistic experience and around adults who are drinking. And this is different. This is scary, but also exciting. I can totally see why that matters.
Hi, I'm Greg Potters with the albumreview.net podcast. Do you want to amplify your passion? Well, now you can. Introducing createmypodcast.com. Now there is a place you can go to get help building your own podcasts. If you're a business owner or an entrepreneur and you're taking the leap like I did and starting a podcast, I can help. I will walk you through a step-by-step process on how to launch, publish, and grow your podcast. I can also offer quick, easy tips on the best equipment, software, and tips and tricks that are going to be right for you and your budget. To get started, go to createmypodcast.com or message me directly at gpotters@createmypodcast.com. Let's get started. Talking about scars, this is a song that I'm not sure if it's a song I would put on my, okay, I have to play this for my friend that I have to get into Rush list.
Right.
Although I did note that the song has a really complex drum pattern, Alon, where Neil used both, I read, acoustic and electric drums, or electronic drums. The drum line was an inspiration from a tribal rhythm that Neil heard
in Senegal, I think.
Yes, yeah.
Am I remembering that correctly? Yeah.
Yep. And he went on, he heard it and he went on to incorporate the pattern into his live drum solos. And if anybody's ever been to a Rush show, they've experienced the Neil drum solo. And it's just unlike anything. I think the first one I ever saw was Tommy Lee when he was up on this platform, Tommy Lee from Motley Crue, and Neil just takes it to, it's not even worth, Neil just takes it to a level that, my reaction, and I've said this in other episodes to other people, my reaction is to laugh. And I'm laughing because of how just ludicrous the talent level is.
Yeah.
To this day, when I still hear La Villa Strangiato, when I still hear Xanadu, I still laugh uncontrollably. And I think a lot of people who don't know me are in the room going, what is wrong with this guy? But I love that. I love that. I love that I'm having my own moment. And
it's a beautiful reaction to it, actually. Right? I spent a little time mountain biking. I had to give it up because my hips started bothering me. So I just started when I had to give it up. But whenever I would do try my first jump or try a tricky thing and almost hurt myself, I would giggle uncontrollably. Right? It's part of that as a fear reaction, but I love the idea of, and the Dalai Lama laughs a lot. And I think looking at something and the awe coming out in laughter is what a wonderful way to experience it. I actually want to applaud that experience because I think I should try that. I should try listening to Xanadu and being like, wow, that's just nuts. That is nuts. I laugh a little at the audacity of thinking to write a song about Vitor the Snow Dog.
Yeah, I know. It's. Well, you mentioned earlier the band chose Rupert Hine to produce Presto, and I think they were mature enough. And I wanted to point this out. I can't recall, Alon, a band who is less hung up or least hung up on individual ego.
Oh yeah.
But nevertheless, they wanted a producer who they could trust and to provide an objective point of view to their ideas, right? So even though they had their minds made up that they wanted to do an album with less synth this time and more guitars, when they met Rupert, they felt a connection and they liked that his personality was to push the band a little bit out of their comfort zone, even though they already had an outline in mind. And they also liked that he hadn't just worked, like you were saying earlier, Alon, Rupert Hine hadn't just worked with rock bands. He'd worked across several genres. So the band, when they completed the recording of the album, they were able to then secure a new record contract and sign with Atlantic Records.
Right.
So I wanted to get into the next song that came up on my list, which was Superconductor. Superconductor is a song that I can also remember not necessarily falling in love with when I first heard it. I think some of it was because of the repetitive chorus. But when I dove a little bit deeper into this track, Alon, I found that Neil's lyrics really discuss the superficiality of mainstream music, which many Rush fans, many music fans would agree Rush was not really part of the mainstream.
Package like a rebel or a hero. Target mass appeal. Make an audience feel he really means it. Package the illusion of persona. Careful to conceal. Like that she's only too real. She's got the screening. Put you in a soft place. Melody so sweet. A strong and simple beat that you can dance to. Watch his every move. Superconductor.
Of course, we could argue the topic today that maybe they are mainstream because now they're an inductee into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
But only because of their fans.
But only because of their fans. You're right. What are your thoughts on this song?
I didn't like it as much when I was listening. That's funny. I had this different reaction in preparing to see you. I think I remember liking it more, and I thought, this song doesn't do much for me. That song, Anagram, and Red Tide, I think is the low point of the album. Those three songs.
I would agree.
And I used to love Warpaint, and now I think it's a little bit silly. But I still love the whole album, but yeah, I don't know what it was about Superconductor. It's not exactly formulaic, a little predictable. There's something about it that I found a little predictable and just trying too hard, whereas so much of the album to me is letting go is about a letting go from technique and from performance.
Yeah.
And this is all inference. I've never heard them say this. But the other thing when you mentioned Rupert Hine that's interesting, I think this is in Getty's memoir of last year, they wanted to work with him again and he was just busy. It wasn't, they liked him and it wasn't, I always assumed it didn't go well. They liked the experience and they just couldn't connect schedules again. I'm pretty sure he says that. I always assumed it was like a one-off and they were like, no, this isn't for us. It's too different.
Right.
So I wonder what that would have been. Because then they go back to their producer from Hold Your Fire, who I think is the weakest sound.
Yeah, your story would make sense because I think there's some similarities to Roll the Bones and Presto. It's again a little bit more of a rockier album. I did with my close friend Zach. I did an album review on a podcast episode on Roll the Bones because that was the first album that, as an established Rush fan, was released. Right, so we had that conversation. But you bring up some good points, and I think again this is really an experience that I enjoyed because I got to peel back the onion more of something that I really hadn't in growing up as a kid. It was I listened to the whole album and then I took from it the Pass and Presto, the songs, and I pushed the others to the side. Another track that I wanted to talk about and wanted your thoughts on as well as Hand Over Fist. I have to admit, this one grew on me.
It's definitely up there with what it might be. I think I made a playlist of all my favorite Rush songs, like the non-obvious ones. It was definitely on there.
Yeah, the non-obvious ones. Yeah.
The bass line's great. The vocals sound great. And I think it's something very touching and very generous about it. It's about human connection and the difficulty of human connection and falling in and out of connection with other people, not necessarily love, not necessarily in a romantic way. And about, I think even you could stretch this, but about society. You know how, and I think it's a great song for the fragmented society we're living through, where people are so rageful and opposed to each other and judgmental. I was walking in the park. There are these two women I crossed paths with, and I don't want to reveal my political persuasion or theirs, but it's different. And I've always enjoyed just saying hi to them on the path. And I noticed they're wearing some political paraphernalia. We had a nice conversation finally. We had a chance because I was just always busy or they were running off about why they voted how they did. And I could see the concerns they had were 4 out of 5 were the same concerns I have. They just thought there were different ways to address them.
Yeah.
And I think we need more songs like Hand Over Fist to talk about human connection. Hand over hand is the strength of a common touch. It's just it's true. And I think when people ask me why I stopped being a pulpit rabbi and what COVID was like, I will say there was a lot less handheld parts. And I mean that both literally and figuratively, where the community started to fray and I didn't get to be at people's bedsides or to have lunch with them anymore. And those were the parts of the job that I just adored. And there were more and more difficult board meetings and fewer bedside visits and fewer lunches and walks in the park.
You bring up
and so I think...
Go ahead, sorry.
No.
Please, continue.
No, I think that's all I had to say. I think it's just that human connection is so important. And you talk about the epidemic of loneliness, not you. One hears about the epidemic of loneliness, and I don't experience it too much. My friends are all busy and we don't get to see each other often enough, but I do feel like I have friends. I think there was some article that said a true friend is someone who will drive you to your colonoscopy.
Airport.
How many people? Airport, right. How many people in your airport's a good one. Airport's a little less gross. But yeah, how many people do you know that will drive you to your colonoscopy appointment?
Or pick you up and then laugh
pick you
at
up,
you.
right? Yeah.
You mentioned about differences. That was an excellent story, Alon. Thank you for adding that. To quote Hand Over Fists, Neil writes, "How can we ever agree? Like the rest of the world, we grow farther apart. I swear you don't listen to me holding my hand to my heart." This really moved me. And did you know that this song was originally written as an instrumental?
Really?
Yeah.
It's got a great bass line. I could see it holding up, but the lyrics are the whole vocal is so beautiful. Interesting.
Neil just kept writing lyrics for it and sharing them with Alex and Getty, and finally they just relented and said, all right, we've got to add words into this. And Neil's lyrics in the track, they discover what initially seems like the basic rules of the game Rocks, Paper, Scissor, or Rock, Paper, Scissor. I always call it Rocks for some reason. But he takes it to a deeper level. But I think your story is extremely relevant, and I hope anyone listening to this can digest that a little bit, because it is a time right now where we are more divided than I think we have been in over 50 years, if not even longer.
I really think the lyrics on Presto are the most, it's not exactly relatable. Bravado has this too, the song on Roll the Bones.
Yeah, it's a good point.
They're the most humane and humanist, right? There's no science fiction epic. There's no imagined new world man, right? They're losing it on Signals does this too, where it's about just shared human experience, relatable human experience. And it's not love songs. And it's somewhat philosophical, but also just psychological.
Yeah.
And sociological in the case of Hand Over Fist, where you need personal, human, and societal connection. It's interesting. I hadn't thought about those lyrics, 30 plus years ago, talking about societal disconnection, and we are feeling it so intensely now.
Yeah, for
it's
sure.
Interesting. It seems very, as they say, prescient.
I've said it a couple of times, but I really enjoyed going back through Presto, and I admire it so much more now, and you've brought a lot more points to light. And I think we've learned just some of the facts that you know, and some of the facts that I know are really more looked at.
You've done some great research. It's delightful. I had no idea Hand Over Fist was going to be an instrumental. That is or that they wrote Presto before they finished Show of Hands. That's both very interesting to me.
But my favorite thing about all this, Alon, is that how it was your Rush album and how passionate you were to do this. Like I said, Roll the Bones was my first, even though it's not my favorite Rush album, that's my firstborn, for lack of a better way of saying it. You don't love him or her more than your second or third or fourth born, but there's just something different. There's something special about that. And that was my entrance to Rush. This was really your entrance, or really the first time you fell in love with it. And I really respect that. I think what Presto has that's unique is, as we've talked about, its ability to break, if we're talking musically, its ability to break the chain of the 80s Rush albums and reintroduce guitar back as the primary instrument. And it might not sound like a lot, but for a lot of Rush fans who didn't like the 80s sound, and I've met them, Presto is proof that Rush was really in charge of their albums by this time that we talked. Since 76, right? After they recorded and released 2112, they didn't listen to any record company, and they did what they wanted. And that to me is, I think, what's the most drawing to the band from even people. What I do love is that even people who said to me, I don't really like their music, but I respect the hell out of them, Greg. And I think as the decades changed and as the music changed a little bit. And I think one could say, my band, they never swayed from their I don't think Rush changed the sound on their albums to necessarily accommodate the sound of the times. They were going with what made them feel right. And it just so happens that they managed to stay relevant and keep their devoted fan base. This is one band where I'm pretty much looking forward to anything that they were going to put out. And I'm not that guy that's like, boo, when a new song is being played, because I hear that from so many people all the time. And it's like, but there was one guy at one show that heard, we're going to play a new song now called Tom Sawyer. And everyone's like, boo, new song. But then 5 years later, that's all they want to hear.
Right.
So, look, I encourage music listeners, music fans to look at it that way. You're paying the money. You're going to watch this band because they're artists. And it's not necessarily, in my opinion, they're there to entertain you. I think they're there to create their art. And if it happens to entertain you, great. But look at it from that standpoint. Look at it as, look how this person is expressing themselves themselves on stage, and look at how this is affecting me and how this is influencing me, right? So the band continued to sell out arenas around the entire world for the next 26 years after Presto. I think that's power. Yeah. But I know they weren't going for power. It just, if anybody remembers the Hall of Fame induction and when they were announced, I've seen every Hall of Fame induction ceremony on television. Sadly, I haven't been there in person. I've never heard a crowd, and maybe I'm biased, but I've never heard a louder cheer for an artist or band as when Rush was announced at that venue. They almost had to quiet them down and pause the show. And I still to this day get goosebumps when I hear, I think it was Dave Grohl, who,
I think it was Dave Grohl, maybe Taylor Hawkins. Yeah. You told me that because I'd only seen their induction. I've never watched another one. So I assumed it was average. So when you told me that, like, you've seen all of them and it was never like that, I was like, wow.
No, yeah. The fans literally went there. I think that the Hall of Fame induction ceremony, in many ways, especially when they've taken it out of Cleveland, which they have many times, they've had it in LA and New York, it's more of a Super Bowl. It's the celebrity event. I don't really care too much about some of these artists, but it's a cool place to go, cool place to be.
The Met Gala.
Exactly.
Yeah. So and CNBC scene. Yeah.
And it was that evening.
It was about music.
It was about music, and the Rush fans infiltrated that arena. And to this day, it still warms my heart. So
I want to go back to something you said, though.
Yeah.
I don't know why I did this. This is a crazy thing. My second year in the pulpit, I gave a Rosh Hashanah sermon, like on one of the biggest holidays of the year, about Rush and the Jewish lessons of Rush. And one was about longevity, and the line from Marathon. I didn't quote lyrics much as talk about their career. You can do a lot in a lifetime, right? But the part I really loved about them that connects to a Jewish topic is there is a line in one of the early rabbinic writings: "Don't believe in yourself till the day you die." Right? That you are not a fixed quantity. And in the documentary Beyond the Lighted Stage, they talk about when they would get bored, they would start other bands together. So they had a reggae version of the band and they had a punk version of the band. And even the line about La Vela Strangiato, where they were writing something they couldn't perform yet. They never thought of Rush as this fixed quantity, which the example I think of is Jimmy Page kept recreating Led Zeppelin. Robert Plant kept trying new things. And they're both great, right? Like later Jimmy Page stuff isn't bad. Later Robert Plant stuff isn't bad. I'm not a huge Zeppelin fan to begin with, but Rush never believed that Rush was a fixed quantity, right? And I think there's a danger in not having responsibility to a record company in that you can get self-indulgent, but they had measures on that in terms of a producer, in terms of feedback to each other. And part of what happened with Presto is Alex hated all the keyboards.
Right.
They said, guys, can we please get back to where you can hear my guitar? So having some accountability is important, and how you introduce that matters, but also not. And I found this working at a nonprofit. Sometimes institutions just become about the institution and the continuity of the institution rather than the making of something new and important. And Rush almost never succumbed to that. And that to me is a part of how inspiring they are. The ruthlessly idiosyncratic, the longevity, the friendship, sort of the intimacy they had. They worked with their best friends for not all. I was surprised to find out that Geddy has other friends.
I know. Like, what? You're cheating on
Yeah. I think he was a friend with that Oscar Peterson's son from high school, and he knew a hockey player. I was like, you can't hang out with people. But to to have that much trust and faith in other people artistically, share all the royalties, one third, one third, one third, which is also unheard of.
Yep.
To push each other creatively, to push oneself creatively, and always never take the easy guitar solo or the easy drum part. It's insane and it's inspiring. And I think what your point is, I'm really okay with people not liking the music, but I think even my wife appreciates like this is an interesting band. They're doing something distinct, even though I don't really enjoy almost any of their music. I think I got her into, there's 2 songs on Power Window. She'll list.
I think you hit the nail right on the head, Alon. I really do.
You too.
As we start to wrap things up here, are there any songs that I didn't touch upon that you wanted to mention or talk about?
Didn't we talk about every single song? If we hadn't talked about Hand Over Fist, I think that's the one that's easy to miss, how beautiful that song is.
Yeah.
Available Light is a beautiful closer, but Hand Over Fist is very special. It's one of the songs they've never performed live that I regret.
Is that true?
Yeah.
They've never performed it live.
There's plenty of songs they've never performed. I was shocked when they performed the song Presto live and during the Time Machine tour. And they just performed the last tour Losing It, which is one of my all-time favorites and almost a tragic and beautiful song.
That was amazing. That was.
Did you see it? Were you at the tour where there were only a couple of venues where they performed Losing It?
Yep, I was.
So jealous.
On the it was the Boston Garden.
R40.
It was, or the whatever they call it now, the TD Garden, and it was just
it's still the Boston Garden to us.
Yeah, it was.
It's Great Woods in the Boston Garden.
That was really special.
Yeah,
that was really special, and how they did it. They went backwards, right?
Yeah.
So they started with songs from the most recent album, and then they just went back and back and back. And I thought that was. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. That might have been the best concert I've ever seen.
I did not go to R40.
And yeah, I don't mean to rub it in, but it was.
No, a friend of mine saw the very last Rush show ever and had like 6 row seats.
Same.
He's not a big fan. I was so angry that he got to see them. He's one of those people that really likes Tom Sawyer and doesn't know that many others. It's like, how do you get the last show ever? So unfair.
Yeah, and I think that there was an aura in the air that night that many knew it might be their last show. But
did you go to the show at the Forum?
No, but my best friend did. My friend that I'm talking about that got me into them, and he lives in LA or right outside.
Okay.
And we still talk about it, but that tour was just. A lot of the 90s, they did a lot of these medleys, and I can remember a lot of 2112 in a lot.
They were cool, yeah.
And they were
medleys
really
were cool.
But it was like, I remember that night, and I'll just say this and then move. But I remember that night, I felt like the only one in the room, like they were doing that set list for me. I've never been at a Rush show and been like, darn it, why are they playing this? I was always open to whatever they threw out there, even the new stuff. And that was the problem too, because I was like, I need to go to the bathroom at some point, but I can't.
There was a set break. Yeah.
But just, especially how they started closing things when they did Jacob's Ladder.
That's a great song.
And Xanadu. And so, but anyway, Presto, again, I can't say it enough. I've said it like 5 times already, but thank you for suggesting this. It was really more your reaction, because your answer was so quick. And I admire the fire and the passion that you had and the decisiveness you had to it. And that you can also admit that there are some tracks that maybe aren't as the strongest, but it really, what this conversation is about is how it made you feel. Yes. And how it affected you. And
which is a lot of how it made you feel. I was very pleased to see. I can tell how it made you feel. I was like, I remember that. That's how it made me feel.
Yeah. And so
bittersweet.
I'm experiencing you as a 14-year-old, as a 48-year-old today, just going back through this again. So thank
49.
You.
I'm 49.
Coming up, man. It's coming up.
Oh,
it's coming
my God.
up. Alon,
thank you so much, Greg.
Thank you for joining me. It's always great to meet another fan of this magnificent group of men. May Neil just rest in peace. And I think we need to collaborate again.
I really liked how much research you did. I thought I was a deep diver into Rush and other music, and you knew some things I'd never heard of. So that was very cool. I love good music trivia.
I think the next time we collaborate, maybe we could talk about this, but I'd love to do and you play the drums. We could do a Peart Bonzo comparison.
I don't know. I don't know enough about drums. I think you're overstating my ability to keep a rhythm.
All right.
I started learning drums so that I could at least keep a beat. I can dance, but I can't. No, calling myself a drummer, I'm a dilettante in everything I do.
But
I'm good at what I do.
Time signatures.
Yeah, but I struggle to count. I can count to 7 as a human being, but counting, feeling the beat and counting things out, especially in Rush, where it's like it doesn't stay in 7 for very long.
No,
right.
No.
By the time you start to figure out the count, it's moving on. So
Exactly.
I think Limelight has 3 different time signatures.
We should have a video recording of each of us listening, maybe in our car, to one of these songs, and then the reaction of me just laughing. And I know my family, my kids are going to remember when they're older. They're going to be like, Dad, I can remember you just like doing all these crazy drum fills and then stopping and laughing. And we were always thinking, what? This man is mad.
I want to step up. I'm going to give two hot takes.
Okay.
Tom Sawyer in the drum solo is not my favorite part of the Rush show. And I think like air drumming and air guitar should not be accurate. I watched an air guitar contest and they were like actually doing bar chords. I was like, why would you do that? It's an air guitar. You don't have to play it, right? It can be wobbly. That's the fun of an air drumming should just be like this. Why do people air guitar accurately? It's no fun. So I want to take that off of your plate. Don't air drum correctly. Just flail yourself around like you're dancing badly or having a seizure. So yeah, I'm very much opposed to accurate air guitar.
That's going to be the next topic. Then we'll do that. So
yes.
I want to do this again. I want to keep in touch.
I'd love to. Please do.
Thank you so much. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day and a wonderful weekend. And
enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much for reaching out to me, Alon. I really enjoyed this conversation.
As they say, keep on rocking.
Keep on rocking, man. All right. Take care. Thank you again for listening to this episode, our review of Rush's 13th studio album, 1989's Presto. I again want to thank Alon Ferency for joining me. Like I said in the intro, Alon is a rabbi, a counselor, coach, creativity consultant, and also, of course, as you couldn't probably tell, he's a huge fan of Rush. And when he reached out to me a few months ago, he enticed me to review this album. Normally not a Rush album that was on my radar of earlier ones to choose and review, but because of Alon's passion, it was infectious. And so because of his passion, I thought it'd be best to review this particular album. So hope you enjoyed. Remember, if you're interested in any of the books or albums that I've discussed in this episode or previous episodes, it's likely that they're going to be on the website. So go to albumreview.net and pick up a copy of your own if you're still into owning albums. Nowadays, with Spotify, Amazon, Apple, etc., we kind of rent these albums and this music, and there's something special about actually owning a copy of your own, if you ask me. You can also listen to all my podcast album reviews at albumreview.net by clicking on the podcast tab. They can also be heard wherever podcasts are available, any platform. So please follow the show on your preferred platform so you can get regular updates on new episodes. If you guys would also be so kind as to pop a quick review or rate the podcast, that, as you might know by this time, helps move the needle and get the word out there. I do want to hear from you, so please email me your feedback, album review requests, and any questions you might have to gpotters@albumreview.net. That's GPOTTERS at albumreview.net. If you'd like to get regular updates on reviews, interviews, product and music news, go to the homepage and join the mailing list. Visit our LinkedIn and YouTube pages and stay tuned for updates on Instagram, Facebook, and that thing they call TikTok. You can find me at albumreview.net. Okay, until the next episode, drop the needle and keep listening. Bye for now.
Take a trip down by the highway. Take a trip down by the highway. Take a trip down by the highway. a trip down by the highway. Take a trip down